I'm June Edwards, and I'm your adjunct instructor. It's a hot up day out there. I'm wearing my hair back because it is so hot. Probably another day in the upper 90s or 100s even. Who knows? But I have a full slate of topics to discuss with you. Remember, we're still in the dog days of August. If you remember me telling you about that, last week or the week before, where it's hot, humid, and there's definitely different hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico. And it is a time when people can get easily irritable, and even your dog, it says, can have problems. My dogs don't want to be anywhere but in the house, in the AC, and on the couch. And boy, I have to say, I really don't blame them. Okay, let's look at our calendar for August 1st. On the fourth week of August, looking at it from August 25th, National Park Service was established in 1916. And you remember it was our former president, Teddy Roosevelt, who loved the great outdoors and took a publicity tour all over the western United States with several of his friends from his Rough Rider days in one of the wars that he fought in. They went all over and they were mapping and enjoying the different plants and animals and doing whatever they could to promote the West. And we're so grateful now that we have our parks, Yellowstone and Yosemite being among some of the first parks established. Well, our current president, President Trump, Donald Trump, has allocated money, about 20 billion with a B dollars over the next 10 years for fixing up the national parks, repairing roads and trails, and replacing some of the older buildings. Some of them go back 100 years or even back to the Great Depression era when the CCC built them, Conservation Corps of young men who needed work, and it was a government program, and they did a lot of good things with our parks. Also, the president has set aside hundreds and hundreds of acres in the Bureau of Land Management area, declared them okay for hunters and fishermen to go in there, and fisherwomen to go in there and enjoy God's great outdoors. Well, you want to be careful. I'm not going outside right now. I thought about a trip up to Northern California. I looked at a map of the fires because it's also fire season. And from the north of the Los Angeles forest, there's the lake fire, which is still burning. But if you go over by San Luis Obispo into Ventura County, everywhere north of there up to the border is red, red, red and burning. And a lot of it not man-made this year. It's caused by lightning strikes from freak storms that drifted this far up north, and they're expecting more lightning strikes. And it's dry lightning, which is very, very dangerous. It's all dangerous. So I saw a picture of the beautiful Golden Gate Bridge. You could hardly see it for the smoke that is covering the entire area. Our governor said in a news conference this week that we have over 10,000 little fires started by strikes that have been combining into larger fires. And so he's asking for help from firefighters as far away as Canada and Australia. Wow. Okay, August 26th, Women's Equality Day. It's the anniversary of women getting the right to vote. That was in 1920, 100 years ago. Women started advocating for that as far back as the 1860s, but it was the signing of the 19th Amendment, excuse me, in 1920 that we have the right to vote now. Another woman besides Susan B. Anthony, who was part of that movement, another woman, August 27th, her birthday was August 27th, 1910, and that's Mother Teresa. She's just a little person, 5 feet tall, little in physical physique, but mighty in stature. She became a nun, and her goal was to serve the poorest of the poor who reside in Calcutta, India. And because of her, there have been ministries established all over the world. My mother met her years ago. She would get up so very early in the morning for her prayers. And then if visitors wanted to meet her, no matter what kind of a person, the richer, a dignitary, whatever, you had to meet with her no later than 5:30 in the morning, because after the visit, which was very short, you had to allow her to go and do her ministry. And of course, her passion was the poor people of Calcutta, and that was always her main emphasis. On the 28th of August we have Dream Day. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his speech on that day in 1963, his famous I Have a Dream speech. And he said, I dream that someday little children will know that a person is not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Such wise words. August 29th, the first Scout camp opened in 1934. The Boy Scouts and then the Girl Scouts quickly followed, and they have done so many good things to help our country and to train our children and bring them up in a good moral way. August 30th is National Toasted Marshmallow Day. Well, if there weren't all those fires, I wouldn't mind having a little one out, a little charcoal fire and toasting and roasting some marshmallows, but I think we'll have to wait on that one. And then August 31st, the last day of this long month, is National Trail Mix Day. If you do get to go out walking, you can take a little snack with yourself, but do not walk in the hottest part of the day. And it does promise to be a scorcher. I just hope I'm not knocked off the air during my talk with you, because the internet wires have been overheating and they've had a hard time with the rolling brownouts keeping the electricity going. There's all these little things that keep knocking us off the air. Okay, I want to get back to Susan B. Anthony. You know, she had quite a life, and she was arrested, and they were going to put her in jail. They fined her $100 and accused her of a felony, which was trying to vote in a presidential election. A controversial part of her story is also something that most people don't know. She opposed the 15th Amendment, which banned discrimination by race, but did not give equality to women. On November 5, 1872, Susan B. Anthony and 14 other women went to their polling place in Rochester, New York, to cast ballots after pointing out that they were citizens who do pay taxes. The election inspectors stood back to let the women vote, figuring their ballots could later be disqualified. and a U.S. Marshal came to Susan B. Anthony's house to arrest her 2 weeks later. She asked the marshal to handcuff her just as they would arrest a man, but he declined. Women are taxed without representation, Susan said at her trial. They are governed without their consent, tried, convicted, and punished without a jury of their peers. And is all this tyranny any less humiliating and degrading to women under our democratic Republican government today than it was to men under their aristocratic monarchy government 100 years before? She was found guilty, but refused to pay the $100 fine. The United States government was too daunted to ever try and collect it. The election inspectors who let her vote were jailed, and she campaigned for their release and later got them freed. Here's a picture of a coin. Shows you her picture, her likeness. She looks very determined there. Well, our president decided that he would pardon her on the day that she is recognized, but the Susan B. Anthony Museum respectfully declined the pardon, saying that she always wore it as a badge of honor because she wanted people to know the cost of women getting the vote. Although it didn't happen during her lifetime, it did happen a few years later. Speaking of elections and voting, last week we were talking about delegates, and we have just watched the Democrat convention, which was mostly virtual this year. We talked about how they picked their delegates. This week we will be watching the Republican Party convention. Will be a lot of it virtual, online, and some of it will be live. How do they pick their delegates? Well, in California, they get 172 delegates plus 169 alternates. Registered Republicans can apply with the name of their pledge candidate through their party by March 31st, and each campaign selects 3 delegates and 3 alternates from the applicants in each congressional district in the state that the candidate wins. The state that, excuse me, the candidate that wins the state, and it's been a Democrat in our state for at least the last 20 years, will get 10 at-large delegates and 10 at-large alternates. We know that it costs a few $1,000s to be a delegate. They say it can be anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000, which includes a $900 delegate fee. And a lot of this, includes the hotels and restaurants. Well, if you're virtual, then you're eating at your own home and sleeping at your own home, so you won't have that cost this year. A disadvantage for the California delegation is that they do not get preferential treatment, even though they have the largest delegation. That swing states get preferential treatment in seating and accommodations, and they also get other perks. One of the advantages is that when you're a delegate, you help decide your party platform, and you get to decide who's elected, and you can say what your feelings are on healthcare and immigration and the budget and any other hot button topics that you want to talk about. We were talking about COVID-19, which is with us, but the rate has gone way, way down. And today, actually yesterday, on Sunday, the governor of our state took Orange County off the watch list because the numbers have been really good for 14 days. Oh, I hope we can keep it that way. And so we will get more businesses opening up, and he will be making the announcement later. So I can't tell you what the new perks are, but I'll just be glad when it's all back to normal and we can be together again. Don't have to worry about being knocked off the internet either. I wanted to talk about some of our heroes of the COVID-19 pandemic. This one is about Clay Young, who could see that it was coming back in February. He is an owner of 30 restored historical buildings in Jonesboro, Arkansas. He got a call from one of his tenants, a man who owned a restaurant, asking him, please, Mr. Young, will you hold off cashing next month's rent check for a while? The businesses were starting to fall apart. Young quickly obliged and wondered what would happen when the other 5 restaurants housed in his buildings would also face problems because of a mandatory quarantine. He knew he was going to take a financial gut punch, but he called them all and told them, April is going to be rent-free. Pay your employees and take care of your family. He posted on Facebook. We will get through this together. He did lose 20% of his total rent income that month, but the morale boost that he gave to the community and himself was worth every penny. I needed some good news, he said. Before long, other landlords got the same idea. David Plassick, who has 12 commercial and residential tenants in Montclair, New Jersey, gave them all a 3-month rent holiday. Phil Murphy, the governor of the state, was so impressed that he mentioned Plassick at a press conference. He said, David exemplifies the spirit we need to see right now, of people stepping up to make sure others can come out of this emergency stronger, and that we will all come out of it stronger. So our hats are off to you, David. Another one is a very simple gesture, but it had a heartfelt meaning to it. As he was watching people walk by his San Francisco apartment, he was unable to go outside himself because of the quarantine. Nick Monroe took a bunch of colorful sticky notes and arranged them in the shape of a heart on his living room window. Half an hour later, the neighbors across the street responded with a sticky note heart of their own. Then another neighbor did the same, and another, and then another. Surprised and delighted, Monroe shared the whole block's emotional outpouring on Nextdoor.com, which is like a neighborhood watch app on the internet. Within 2 days, people from all over San Francisco had joined in. He even got to meet his neighbors across the street for the first time. The hearts drew them out on their balconies, and a new friendship began. It's so weird to be separated from all these people, Monroe said, yet we are truly all in this together. And I will share the hero stories of more people during our quarantine next week. Now, we were talking about the delegates, and I had a funny little poem that a friend of mine wrote for one of the primaries several years ago. So this is called Primary by Mary Raymond. Who to vote for, who to choose, who should win, and who should lose. I'm in a quandary, all because the candidates have many flaws. Each one claims the rest are wrong. No one wants to get along. Is the media to blame, exposing scandals, lies, and shame? Had we known more then, would there be a Roosevelt or Kennedy? Oh, how I wish someone would run as perfect as George Washington. Yay to Mary. What a great poem. And if you have time and like to do some writing and want to write a poem of your own, tongue in cheek like that, or any kind of poem, email it to me at junecedwards1@gmail.com. If you don't get that, I know that Matt has my email address and he can give it to you again. I'll say it one more time. I love getting emails, texts from you. It's a good way for us to communicate. junecedwards1@gmail.com, and I'll share it with our audience. It'll make you famous on the internet. Hooray! Now I have a question for you. What would you do if you were president? If I were president, ... Well, here's what Parade magazine said when they interviewed different people. They interviewed the sports star Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's an NBA superstar and has also written a couple books. He said, I would make Constitution Day, it's in September, a national holiday with public readings from the Constitution. Here's what Drew Barrymore, a movie star, said. I would insist on 3-day weekends. That would change the universe. How about Dr. Oz, the television star? I would ask every 18-year-old to spend a year of service to our country in return for helping them pay for their education or to get a permanent job. How about Dave Ramsey, who's a radio talk show host and a financial advisor? I would tell people to be their special own secret sauce. America is still the best place in the world to start with nothing and make something of yourself. But it's up to you. Here's a retail worker from Missoula, Montana, April Sunset. She says, if I were president, I would take care of our military veterans and homeless people first. I would make sure they had better, affordable health care and resources in the form of medical, psychiatric care, housing, clothing, and food. She says, I wouldn't even entertain the idea of letting immigrants in until we can take care of those who have served this country. And one more, an insurance analyst from Mobile, Alabama. She says, I would make sure everyone has access to affordable health care, regardless of income or employment. Those are all good ideas. Well, what would you do if you were president? And in closing, I just want to share a wonderful story about running for president that was written over 100 years ago by Mark Twain. A Presidential Candidate by Mark Twain. I have pretty much made up my mind to run for president. What the country wants is a candidate who cannot be injured by investigation of his past history, so that the enemies of the party can be unable to rake up anything against him that nobody ever heard of before. If you know the worst about a candidate to begin with, every attempt to spring things on him will be checkmated. Now I am going to enter the field with an open record. I'm going to own up in advance to all the wickedness I have ever done. And if any congressional committee is disposed to prowl around my biography in the hope of discovering some dark and deadly deed, why, let it prowl. In the first place, I admit I treated a rheumatic grandfather of mine in the winter of 1850. He was old and inexpert in climbing trees, but with the heartless brutality that is characteristic of me, I ran him out of the front door in his nightshirt at the point of a shotgun, and I caused him to bowl up a maple tree where he remained all night while I emptied shot into his legs. I did this because he snores. I will do it again if I ever have another grandfather. I am as inhuman now as I was in 1850. I candidly acknowledge that I ran away at the Battle of Gettysburg. My friends have tried to smooth over this fact by asserting I did so for the purpose of imitating Washington, who went into the woods at Valley Forge for the purpose of saying his prayers. But it's a miserable lie. I struck out in a straight line for the Tropic of Cancer because I was scared. I wanted my country saved, but I preferred to have somebody else do the saving. I still entertain that preference. My invariable practice in war has been to bring out of every fight 2/3 more men than when I went in. My financial views are of the most decided character, but they're not going to increase my popularity. I do not insist upon the special supremacy of paper money or hard money. The great fundamental principle of my life is take any kind that you can get. The rumor that I buried a dead aunt under my grapevine was correct. The vine needed fertilizing. My aunt had to be buried, and I dedicated her to this high purpose. Does that unfit me for the presidency? The Constitution of our country does not say so. No other citizen was ever considered unworthy of this office because he enriched his grapevines with his dead relatives. Why should I be the first? I admit also that I am not a friend of the poor. I regard the poor man in his present condition as so much wasted raw material. Cut up and properly canned, he might be made useful to fatten the natives of the cannibal islands and to improve our export trade with that region. I shall recommend legislation upon the subject in my first message to the people. My campaign cry will be, desiccate the poor working man, stuff him into sausages. These are about the worst parts of my record. On them I come before the country. If my country doesn't want me, I'll go back again. But I recommend myself as a safe man, a man who starts from the basis of total depravity and proposes to be fiendish to his last dying breath. And he wrote that in 1879. Mark Twain, you were a master at writing. Wow. I want to match some of the former presidents to their famous nicknames. Do you know what they called Dwight Eisenhower? Did they call him the accidental president? Did they call him Honest Abe, or did they just call him Ike? Yes, they called him Ike. See if you can guess these. Franklin Roosevelt. What was his famous nickname? Was it the father of the Constitution, FDR, or give him hell, Harry? Franklin Roosevelt. We still call him by his nickname, FDR. What about Abraham Lincoln? Was he the father of his country, the father of the Declaration of Independence, or known as Honest Abe? If you said Honest Abe, you got that one right. How about George Washington? What was his nickname? We know it had the word father in it because he was the first one. If you guessed it, father of his country, you got that one right. How about Richard Nixon? Richard Nixon was a lawyer. He had a rather unfortunate nickname. Do you remember what it was? It was kind of a tricky name. Yes, that's it. Tricky Dick. How about Theodore Roosevelt? Yes, he was a Rough Rider. He and his soldier friends. And Harry Truman. His nickname? He had a slogan for his nickname. Give him hell, Harry. That's what it was. Okay, you guys. Well, that's enough thinking for right now. I hope I've juggled a couple of the brain cells in your brain. I know I did it to mine. I will see you next week. I'm so glad that we can have this time together. I wish you a nice, cool week, and I will see you next time. Bye, everybody. Stay cool, stay calm, stay collected, and if nothing else, get a cup of coffee and stay relaxed.